This UCSD-TV program is a presentation of University of California Television for educational and non-commercial use only.
I'm going to speak to the issue of the free rider, which George Williams created as a malign entity, as it were, if you want to look at things morally, or as a interference and predator against altruists. First of all, the genetic paradox of altruism was rather nicely but very loosely defined by Charles Darwin. Darwin had two answers, one of which was kin selection, although he didn't call it that. And I'm going to be speaking about altruism with my own definition, as it were, which is that altruism involves extrafamilial generosity. That is, kin selection is a separate domain as far as I'm concerned here. Darwin also has a famous quote about group selection. He basically felt that a group that had he was thinking in terms of warfare, a lot of patriots was going to outdo a group that didn't have altruistic patriots, and therefore group selection could operate at an analogical basis compared to individual selection. The early sociobiologists on altruism were Robert Trivers as the sort of seminal idea contributor, and Edward O. Wilson and Richard D. Alexander. Wilson, of course, chose reciprocal altruism as a good theory for explaining altruism. And he thought that group selection was problematically weak precisely because of the free rider problem, as well as some structural problems as well. Richard D. Alexander brought in some new ideas, one of which was selection by reputation, also currently called costly signaling in one of its narrower interpretations. The idea being that the altruist would be chosen, as Randy was saying, would be chosen preferentially and therefore would have advantages of cooperation over non-altruists. I should mention that Alexander also was interested in group selection. He knew the problems, and prehistoric warfare was a major unknowable. Therefore, he sort of left it alone. With respect to social selection, I'm going to define it here for humans, and this definition could probably be contested, but I would say social selection takes place when people select other people as partners, for example, on the basis of their preferences. And Alexander's selection by positive reputation is one example. He also mentioned selection by negative reputation, in passing at least, and I'm going to be elaborating on that here, because I think an important additional mechanism is free rider suppression. That is, in human groups, free riders are suppressed, both at the level of genotype, but less so there, but also at the level of phenotype. Well, who are these notorious free riders? Normally, they're considered to be cheats. Bernie Madoff comes to mind. But the free rider in classical evolutionary modeling has been the cheater. And I would like to suggest that if you rethink it a bit, that bullies are the biggest free riders of all. Humans are a hierarchical species, so are most monkeys and apes. And there's good evidence that there's a genetic reward in being at the top of a hierarchy. So bullying, to me, is simply another case of free riding. Somehow a cheat makes you think of free rider. A bully is taking a free ride, but looks more like a power figure. For some reason, they haven't been brought into modeling. How do you slow down free riding? Because the more you slow down free riding, the more of a chance altruistic genes have of making it. And a free rider can be slowed down in two ways. One way is to, at the level of phenotype, simply to make sure they don't express their free riding tendencies, in which case the genes could stay in place, but there would still be not a disadvantage for altruists, because at the level of phenotype, the free riders are not taking advantage. Well, one way you do this is by the threat of punishment. If you have a human group that's moralistic, Trivers called it moralistic aggression, very, very universal in hunter-gatherers and all humans. People start worrying about outcomes in terms of groups turning on them, and therefore, let's say a bullying free rider will be cut down, or if he either will be cut down, or if he refrains from his behavior, then he can stay in a decent position genetically. But if he free rides, excuse me, if he free rides too hard, as it were, he will be executed. Capital punishments, universal in hunter-gatherers, or other bad things can happen to him, like ostracism. People avoid him, he can't cooperate anymore, and so forth. So I would say that this is a human type of social selection, in some ways rather unique, even though in chimpanzees especially, but also bonobos, we do see social preferences working against bullies. Well, how did we get there? In terms of being able to act as groups to suppress free riding or punish free riders. If we look at ancestral pan, which is my name for the ancestor that we share with chimps and bonobos roughly 6 million years ago, plus or minus a million. If we look at ancestral pan, we'll see that there were subordinate coalitions that worked against high-ranking males. There have been several cases of probable disappearances, let's say, which might have been death, certainly wounding, certainly exile from the group, which is dangerous in a chimpanzee species because you're out in a peripheral area where you could be caught by an enemy patrol. So bullying has been treated as a problem by groups of chimpanzees. And also bonobos have a rather different pattern, which I'll get to presently. My hypothesis is that when people began to hunt large game, they had some novel problems, that the game had to be shared equitably, and an alpha male system wouldn't work. Therefore, they had to get rid of the alpha male system in order to do this. And that's a theme that I will be following up on. But now let's look at some of the contributors to the ancestral pan picture. First of all, chimpanzees regularly go on patrol. And what we're talking about here is the capacity of a group, or all the males in a group, to have a common purpose and to act on it aggressively. That is, what are the underpinnings of the moralistic aggression that we see in humans? This is a patrol at Kibale in Uganda. Patrols have been studied quite well now at quite a few field sites. It's a systematic scouting of territory, looking for members of other communities to attack. There have been fatalities recorded across the breadth of Africa. And this is just a nasty picture of one chimp displaying at a dead enemy, but we'll pass that on. Bonobos. Bonobo females cooperate all the time, routinely, whereas with chimps it's rather episodic, to basically counter the domination of males. And males don't form coalitions among bonobos, so they are on their own against coalitions of females that basically have, in spite of the fact that they can't go up against a male individually very often, the females are considered to be co-dominant with males. And if we're thinking about a bullying free rider, I chose this particular picture off the internet because the male to the right has the look. So ancestral Pan cooperated as coalitions in threatening or attacking neighbors. Bonobos do this as well. They so far haven't had fatalities. One wounding was reported by Kano, but territorial encounters involve larger groups chasing smaller groups, so it's clear the males are acting as coalitions against enemies, as it were. Ancestral Pan cooperated in coalitions then, because humans also do this, and therefore if chimps, bonobos, and humans all do it, Ancestral Pan did it. The name of that game is parsimony. Ancestral Pan specifically was engaged in counter-dominant coalitions. That is, they go up against individuals who individually have power, but the power can be eroded by a coalition going up against them. And because they go against bullies, humans do it, all hunter-gatherers of the nomadic type are egalitarian. They basically don't countenance bullies at all. Chimps and bonobos at least whittle away at their power. So free rider suppression in the sense of bullying free riders as opposed to cheats is ancient. So we've looked at some of the bases of group cooperation, and now we're going to talk more about humans. Once we had active large game hunting with ungulates as the targets, people pretty much had to cooperate. This happened at 250,000 years ago, and they had to cooperate simply because of the very limited weapons they had. And if they didn't have to cooperate in hunting, which I think they did, they certainly had to cooperate in sharing large carcasses. All of a sudden you have a huge package of food that comes in very intermittently, very unpredictably, and not too often. And to get nutrition out of this, to keep an entire hunting team healthy and powerful, as it were, in the field, you need to share the meat pretty equitably. And that's not going to happen the way chimps and bonobos share meat, because there's always sort of a meat hog who presides over the meat, and then some get it and some don't. But there's never universal sharing of equal portions. And hunter-gatherers actually make this happen. There's also cooperation in reducing alpha power, because you have to have an egalitarian order in order to share meat in this way. And there's also cooperation in threatening or fighting territorial competitors. So there were a lot of different expressions of the human capacity to cooperate in groups, mostly male groups, in accomplishing various different types of objectives. And this is just a little bit of fun to look at some rock art. This simply shows two men cooperating in a hunt. Here we see that hunting dangerous prey with weapons can be confrontational, so in a way it's a practice for both warfare or raiding or social control. This particular slide is a bit ambiguous. It looks to me like it's partly hunting and partly fighting. And I simply put it in because I think the two are conjoined in the sense of cooperation being involved. And here we have fighting, which is individual, that is, it looks to be more at the level of a few individuals fighting. And here we have fighting by, it looks like about 11, but there's some of this picture has eroded, but at least 11 actors. And if you think of a typical hunting band that is large enough to share meat and has enough hunters to bring the meat in often enough so that it can be an important part of the diet, you need about 5 hunters per band. There's some very good theory out of human behavioral ecology that suggests that this is something that all social carnivores engage in. So here we have just about the right number of males, adult males, fighting to suggest that it's between 2 bands with about 5 hunters per band, with 11 total. And it may be a little bit larger, but bands generally tend to be 20 to 30 persons, which gives you 5 or 6 active hunters. And finally, we have the only recorded instance of non-literate human warfare, but it isn't exactly warfare. It's a New Guinea great fight. This is an example of 2 very large phratries or patra groups coming together, and they basically strut around and do maneuvers, and occasionally a couple of people get killed, and then they all go home. The same people also do pre-dawn genocidal attacks, so this is more like a medieval tourney, but it does show, you can see even in the picture, in the slide, you can see that there is patterning. These people are making maneuvers, as it were. It's highly coordinated and cooperative. Archaic Homo sapiens, 250,000 years ago, probably had at times cooperative warfare, depending on population density and defensibility of resources. They carried cooperative counter-domination much farther than their predecessors, I would guess, due to large game hunting, which created the need to get rid of the alpha male system so meat could be distributed efficiently. So alpha behavior, free rider behavior, was thoroughly suppressed by social control. Social selection today. In human hunter-gatherers, bullies are free riders, probably much more than cheaters. And the threat of moralistic aggression by the entire band, the rest of the band, largely holds them in check. There's a wonderful book by anthropologist Jean Briggs, which talks about an Eskimo personality, a guy who really wanted to be aggressive, but he was so scared of people catching on to it that he was constantly stifling his aggressive nature, as it were. When people get out of hand, and I've looked at many hunter-gatherers in this respect, when they get out of hand, they are likely to get killed. Well, let's talk about implications for the study of altruism. Free riders are a major problem in modeling the selection of extrafamilial generosity. Randy's already talked about models, but selection by reputation, reciprocal altruism, and group selection are models that are particularly vulnerable to free riding. And I believe that future modeling, if we're going to get at the bottom of the altruism paradox, and I'm not sure we're 90% of the way there, I think we need to look at free rider suppression, because humans are the only species I can think of that act as moralistically aggressive groups to suppress free riders at the level of phenotype. And if they're suppressed at the level of phenotype, then they can't really do any damage to the altruists. And this changes the modeling quite radically. Thank you.